Story number 1. One morning, my mother-in-law's faucet broke, and instead of calling a plumber, she decided to call me. Before doing so, she called my wife to complain about the pile of dishes in the sink. It was my day off, and although I wasn't in much of a mood to go anywhere, I couldn't say no. When I asked my wife if she really thought I should go, she shrugged and said, "It's only a half-hour drive. It's no big deal." So I took her words seriously, packed up and headed to my mother-in-law's house. When I arrived, she greeted me warmly, her face lit up with a wide smile. She ushered me inside with cheerful energy, asked me how I'd gotten there, and offered to sit at the kitchen table before I even had a chance to take off my coat. Her eagerness to make me feel at ease was obvious, as she quickly brought out a plate of cookies and a glass of water, insisting that I relax a bit before getting to work. "Don't worry," I assured her. "We'll have it fixed in no time. Show me the problem." She led me into the kitchen where I began to examine the broken faucet. The kitchen was flooded with sunlight streaming in through the window, and I noticed the faint smell of freshly baked cookies lingering in the air, even though there were none in sight. The aroma gave the room a cozy warmth, evoking a sense of nostalgia and homeliness that matched perfectly with my mother-in-law's cheerful energy. It seemed to set the tone for the entire day, making me see the work in progress not as a chore, but as a moment of togetherness. When I got to work, my mother-in-law kept chatting and offered me something to eat. I politely declined, but mentioned that a glass of lemonade would be nice. She quickly brought lemonade and even opened a box of candy. As I worked, she told me stories about her youth, laughing as she recalled her adventures in college and how she once tried to fix the sink on her own, causing the kitchen to flood. She described in great detail the chaos of that day, how the water rushed in uncontrollably, wetting the floor and even spilling into the living room. She recalled frantically calling her neighbor, a retired handyman, who came with a box of tools and a reassuring smile. The story ended with her thanking him heartily and reappreciating the plumber's skills, which, she joked, were clearly not her forte. James appreciated the plumber's skills, which she joked were clearly not her forte. It made the job more enjoyable, and I felt like I was learning new facets of her personality. We chatted while I worked on the faucet, and soon the repairs were completed. Feeling satisfied, I told her it was fixed, and she clapped her hands in delight. After some friendly conversation and a second glass of lemonade, I headed home. Later that day, my wife noticed a faint odor of lemonade and started teasing me. "What is that? Did you drink lemonade at Mom's?" she asked with a playful smirk. I laughed and told her to give me a break. "That was hard work," I joked, sinking down on the couch. A few days later, while my wife was at work, the phone rang. It was my mother-in-law, calling to thank me again for the repairs. She joked that she might need my help with other things around the house. I assured her that I would stop by if she needed anything, but only after I finished my work. She laughed and promised not to distract me from my work. Over the next few weeks, I stopped by from time to time to help with minor repairs. Each time, she made sure to greet me with a treat and conversation. She even shared stories from her youth that were both amusing and enlightening. One day, she showed me an old photo album, pointing out snapshots from her travels and talking about the people she had met along the way. One photo in particular caught my eye. It showed her standing in front of a grand old lighthouse with a group of friends. She told me how she had visited the coast in her 20s and climbed to the top of the lighthouse to watch the sunrise. She described the breathtaking view of the vast ocean, the coolness of the morning breeze, and how it was one of the most peaceful moments she had ever experienced. Hearing her memories made me realize how adventurous and full of life she was, and made me appreciate even more what she is now. I went to the vineyard and took her outside, and asked her if she remembered telling me stories when she was young. It was interesting to get a new perspective on her life, and it made me appreciate her even more. Despite my initial reluctance to spend my day off to renovate, I realized that these visits were a chance to bond with her in a way I hadn't been able to before. It became clear that she liked having someone to talk to, and I found myself looking forward to her stories and those little moments when we chatted. Eventually, my wife started teasing me, saying how often I helped her mother. "You're her favorite handyman now," she joked, but I didn't mind. It felt good to be helpful, and my mother-in-law's gratitude justified the effort. She even started baking cookies especially for my visits, and I often left with a small box to share with my wife. Over time, I visited her less often due to my busyness, but our casual conversations and my willingness to help kept her connected. It was obvious that she appreciated the support, and I appreciated the opportunity to strengthen our family bond in a simple but meaningful way. After all, it wasn't just about fixing faucets. It was about building trust and showing kindness where it mattered most. Like the day she recounted her lighthouse adventure, her eyes lit up with joy as she recounted the peaceful sunrise and the feeling of freedom. It was moments like these that reminded me of how small gestures can create lasting connections. And every time I saw her smile as I walked through the door, I realized that these small acts of kindness make a big difference, even now. When the faucet is running perfectly, she occasionally calls and asks if I can stop by to help with something small, or just for a cup of tea. These moments have become a cherished part of our family's history, and I'm glad I took that first step towards such meaningful communication. I realized we had an interesting game waiting for us in the bedroom, where she asked me to fix the foot of the bed. Story number 2. The road to the village was incredibly scenic, winding through lush green fields dotted with wildflowers in bright shades of yellow, purple, and red. Birds chirped melodiously from the trees that lined the road, their branches forming a natural canopy overhead. Mateo caught himself thinking of taking a vacation from work and escaping here, imagining the peace and beauty of this idyllic landscape as the perfect antidote to the hectic city life. The thought of kebabbing, fishing, and relaxing by the bathhouse sounded like a slice of paradise. However, escaping the routine of city life proved difficult. His wife, Isabella, had recently given birth to a beautiful son, Marco, who was only 7 months old. Marco was not only beautiful, but most importantly, healthy. However, along with the joys of parenthood came problems: constant noise, new responsibilities, and lack of time to relax. Isabella, fully immersed in her maternal duties, often neglected herself and her husband. Because of this, a quiet distance developed between them, and Mateo sometimes felt that he missed the closeness they had once shared. He understood her fatigue and admired her dedication, but the lack of shared moments and emotional connection weighed on him. Mateo often reflected on how much he wished he could support her, help her find a balance that would allow them both to feel closer and more valued. The changes in her appearance were noticeable. She had gained weight and looked perpetually tired, but Mateo was prepared for these difficulties, for he had long dreamed of having a child. The moment he took Marco in his arms for the first time, his heart was filled with unconditional love. Sleepless nights and extra responsibilities were just part of the journey, and Mateo accepted them, even if it meant sacrificing his own comfort and hobbies. Today, Mateo was on his way to visit his mother-in-law, Signora Bianca, a woman of remarkable character and strength. Despite the stereotypes, Mateo had a wonderful relationship with her. Resourceful, physically strong, and kind-hearted, Mateo was the perfect son-in-law, which did not escape Bianca's attention. Mateo usually visited Isabella, but today she preferred to stay home with Marco. Bianca needed help around the house, and Mateo gladly agreed to help. He also looked forward to her company, as their conversations always enriched him and gave him insight. Bianca was a lively and warm woman who knew how to make everyone feel at home. Mateo remembered the first time he met her, how she had insisted that he stay for dinner despite his protests that he was in a hurry. She had prepared such a delicious and cozy meal that Mateo had stayed longer than he had planned, enchanted by her fascinating stories and genuine hospitality. Moments like these defined her warmth and her ability to make anyone feel like family. Though she had admirers, she remained unwaveringly independent, channeling her energy into her family, and her long braid with gray strands testified to a timeless elegance. Her blue eyes, crinkled at the corners from frequent smiles, radiated warmth and kindness. Mateo often thought that Isabella had inherited her mother's gentle beauty and strength, qualities he deeply admired. When Mateo arrived, Bianca greeted him with her characteristic smile and a warm hug. "Mateo, I'm so happy to see you!" she exclaimed, and led him to a table laden with viands. They spent several hours talking, first about Marco and Isabella, but soon their conversation turned to a variety of topics. Mateo always found Bianca's stories fascinating, full of wit and wisdom. Time seemed to fly by as they laughed and shared anecdotes. Bianca's stories often drew lessons from her past, and Mateo couldn't help but feel in awe of her resilience and optimism. Later that afternoon, they went to the vegetable garden. The air was filled with the sweet aroma of ripening fruit mixed with the earthy smell of fresh earth. Mateo climbed the trees to pick ripe cherries, the rough bark pressing against his palms and the light breeze rustling the leaves around him. Each time he handed a handful of shiny red fruit to Bianca, her merry laughter mingled with the distant buzzing of insects and the occasional chirp of birds. Everything around them was filled with the energy of summer, and their work brought satisfaction and joy. Their laughter echoed in the warm summer air as they worked side by side. Matteo admired Bianca's energy and resilience. She joked and bantered with him, making the work seem like a pleasant pastime rather than a job. As they progressed through the garden, Bianca shared planting and care tips, and her passion for the land was evident in every word. As the sun began to set, coloring the sky in shades of orange and pink, they decided to cool off by the water was refreshing, a perfect respite from the summer heat. Bianca talked about her childhood, and Matteo listened intently, finding her stories both fascinating and inspiring. She talked about the festivals by the river and the simple joys of village life, reminding Matteo of the importance of living in the moment. By the time they returned to the house, night had fallen. The crickets chirped their soothing melody, and a soft breeze rustled through the trees. Matteo felt a deep sense of gratitude for this day, for the simplicity of life in the village, the warmth of family bonds, and the joy of meaningful connections. It was a day he would cherish as a reminder of the beauty of life's simple joys. He resolved to bring Isabella and Marco here more often, envisioning his son growing up with fond memories of this idyllic place. Matteo knew that such moments are the threads that make up a happy life. Story number 3. The Dupont family arrived in the south of France, in the picturesque Provence region, after a scenic drive through vineyards and golden fields of sunflowers. As they stepped out of the car, the air greeted them with the fragrant scent of lavender and the quiet buzzing of cicadas, instantly enveloping them in the tranquil charm of the region. They paused for a moment to admire the view of the distant hills, flooded with warm sunlight, and felt excited for the days ahead. After spending a week here, they were fully immersed in the local way of life. They savored the culinary delights of the region: brown cheeses, meats roasted over fragrant coals, tangy sauces to spice things up, a variety of pickles, fish dishes, and fresh seafood from the nearby Mediterranean. Each meal felt like a feast, and local wines complemented their evening. Newlyweds Julien and Chiara were accompanied on this trip by Julien's mother. Françoise, an energetic woman with a love of good food, possessed a magnificent figure that attracted admiring glances wherever she went. At the local market, vendors often let her sample different foods, noting her radiant presence and beauty. On evening strolls through the village, strangers stopped to compliment her elegant style and warm smile. These encounters, filled with genuine admiration, made her feel more cherished and confident than ever. For the first time in her life, she received an overwhelming number of compliments and felt like a goddess walking among mortals. In Provence, women with curves were considered the epitome of beauty, and Françoise's confidence blossomed under the warmth of this adoration. Chiara, on the other hand, was very slender and found it difficult to fit into the local aesthetic. She often saw herself in store windows and felt that her physique made her out of place among the vibrant energy of the locals. Thoughts swarmed in her head. Am I too different to belong in this town? Will they always see me as an outsider? This insecurity was compounded by well-meaning but excessive attempts to encourage her to eat more, causing her to withdraw even further into herself. Despite her elegance, she often felt out of place among the locals, who looked at her with mixed curiosity and concern. The locals, showing generous hospitality, tried to feed Chiara hearty meals to, as they said, color her cheeks. However, the richness of the cuisine proved overwhelming to her and she struggled to adapt. This unintended attention made her feel uncomfortable. Julian, always a devoted husband, reassured her. Don't worry, my love. Let them talk. To me, you are perfect just the way you are, he said with a warm smile. Despite his comforting words, however, Chiara couldn't completely shake off her feelings of discomfort. She felt like a stranger, especially since Françoise seemed to enjoy every moment of attention to her. The family had taken up residence in a charming country house owned by an elderly lady named Madame. The quaint charm of the house was given by the weathered shutters, the curly roses, and the open courtyard that served as the heart of the house. Inside, the house was equally charming. Exposed wooden beams, terracotta floors, and the faint scent of lavender wafted through the air. There was a rustic wooden table in the cozy kitchen and a few worn armchairs arranged around a stone fireplace in the living room. Despite the lack of modern conveniences, there was a real air of kindness about the shower. Was a simple structure in the yard, consisting of an old watering can hung from a frame. The water was heated naturally by the sun in an open cistern, making it warm and inviting by the time they returned from their beach walks. It was a modest structure, but it added to the charm of their stay here. Each evening, after spending the day at the beach or exploring the nearby villages, the family took turns using the courtyard shower. Françoise, who loved to sing, often filled the neighborhood with her cheerful melodies while she took her bath. Her voice, clear and energetic, rang out over the quiet houses, harmonizing with the sounds of the countryside. Julien found her singing charming and often chuckled to himself, thinking, "She's certainly making the most of this trip." On one particularly sweltering day, the family decided to stay home. Chiara wasn't feeling well, having overeaten a new meal the night before. Julien, always attentive, ran to the pharmacy to get some medicine. Chiara spent the morning relaxing on the shady terrace, sipping herbal tea and watching the trees sway gently in the warm breeze. Françoise, ignoring the heat, decided to cool off in the shower in the courtyard. Standing under the warm jets of water, she began to hum an old French folk song, her voice rising and falling in time with the melody. Julien, who could hear her from inside, couldn't help but smile. She really is in her element, he thought. After her shower, Françoise returned to the terrace with her damp hair wrapped in a towel and joined Julien and Chiara. The three of them spent the afternoon in quiet relaxation. They played cards, laughed over shared memories, and enjoyed the slow pace of life in the countryside. Françoise told a humorous story about getting lost in a bustling Paris market many years ago, and Julien shared fond memories of a family picnic by a serene lake when he was a child. These stories elicited laughter and warmth, deepening their bond as they soaked in the peacefulness of their surroundings. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they cooked a simple dinner together, savoring every bite and reflecting on the simple joys of the day. Despite the occasional hardship, the family was grateful for the opportunity to reconnect and create cherished memories in such a beautiful setting. Feeling of depression. Story number 4. One evening, my wife and I decided to play cards. It was a tradition we had started early in our marriage, an easy way to relax and reconnect after stressful days. The game often brought out our competitive sides, but most of all it was a reminder of the playful bond. We often used games as entertainment, and this time we upped the ante by playing for desire. She lost, and I, as the winner, got the right to ask for anything. Betting in our games has always been part of the fun, but this time the idea of making a wish added an extra level of excitement and tension. The rules were simple. The winner could ask for anything within reason, and the loser had to fulfill the request, no matter how unexpected or bizarre. "Go ahead, make your wish," she said with a playful grin, clearly expecting something trivial. "Instead, I want to ask someone out on a date." She stared at me in surprise. "What? You're kidding? With who?" "Your mom," I replied, trying to keep a straight face. At first she thought I was crazy, but eventually she laughed. "Okay, a deal is a deal." The next day I got dressed, put on my best suit, and went to visit my mother-in-law, Mrs. Carter. Usually my wife and I visited her together, but this time I went alone. Mrs. Carter was surprised to see me, and even more surprised when I explained the situation to her. "A date? With me?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "And who exactly came up with the idea?" "In fact, your daughter," I replied with a sheepish grin. She looked amused, shaking her head with a mixture of disbelief and humor. "Well," she said, smiling, "how long have you been planning this?" "Since I first met you," I joked. "You have such a colorful personality." Mrs. Carter laughed, clearly enjoying the flattery. She brought homemade compote and snacks, and we spent the afternoon talking about everything from her childhood to her favorite hobbies. She reminisced about growing up on a farm, telling us about sneaking into the woods at dawn to pick wild berries and watch the sunrise. She also shared her love of painting and showed me some of her recent work, colorful landscapes inspired by her travels. The room filled with warmth and laughter as we delved into her memories, creating an atmosphere of nostalgia and peacefulness. She shared stories of her youth, including how she met her late husband and some of the adventures they had together. The conversation flowed easily, and I found myself genuinely enjoying her company. When I got home, my wife was anxious to know how it had gone. "Tell me everything," she said, as soon as I walked in the door. "We talked and drank juice and shared stories," I replied. "It was a nice, innocent walk." "That's it?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. I nodded and she looked satisfied, though she still looked a little skeptical. Over the next few days, my wife brought up the card game more than once. She seemed to be amused by the whole situation, and she never stopped teasing me. "You've never been so eager to visit my mom before," she said with a laugh. "Are you trying to win her over with your charm?" She even joked during breakfast. "Do you think she'll invite you to tea next time? Maybe you should bring a bouquet of flowers." Her teasing was relentless but always playful, and I couldn't help but laugh along with her. "You've never been so eager to visit my mom before," she said with a laugh. Should I be jealous? A week later, we were playing cards again. This time, my wife lost again. "So, what's your wish?" she asked, already guessing the answer. "Another date with your mom," I said with a smirk. She laughed. "You're unbelievable." The second visit was just as pleasant as the first. This time I brought a gift of chocolates and lemonade. Mrs. Carter was touched by the gesture. We spent the afternoon reminiscing about the holidays and sharing family anecdotes. She even showed me some old photo albums, pointing out pictures of her children when they were young and telling funny stories about their childhood antics. Before I left, she thanked me for brightening her day and said she really enjoyed our conversations. When I got home, my wife greeted me with mock wariness. "So, how did it go this time?" "Exactly the same as last time," I assured her. "Just good conversation and a few laughs." "Well, I'm glad she's enjoying herself," my wife said. "I guess she's been a little lonely lately." As the days went by, our card games continued, and the playful dynamic between the three of us became a source of humor. My wife's initial wariness was replaced by amusement, and Mrs. Carter seemed to enjoy the attention. From time to time, she would call me to share an amusing anecdote or ask about a book we were discussing. In the end, it was all a lot of fun, and it brought us closer together as a family. Looking back, I can say that this experience reminded me how important it is to keep relationships lighthearted and fun. It showed me that sometimes the simplest gestures, such as a shared laugh or a kind word, can strengthen a relationship in ways I never expected. It has also taught me to appreciate the unique bonds between family members, even those relationships that often go unnoticed or unappreciated. It's moments like these, filled with laughter and fellowship, that truly make life unforgettable.